Let's go over the solution for this route-based multi-counter. Just to remind you, the task was, and this is where I can run it, pluck up. I can run this application and access it on localhost hello, and then it starts counting. If I reload, it counts. If I give another word, doesn't matter, that counts separately. And even if I stop the application and restart it, I will get back the same data. So what happens is that it created a file called count.json. If I show the content of this, well, you can't see much here, so let me just open it in a different way. So apparently I typed in whirl instead of world, and it was 3 times, and hello was 3 times, and the favicon ICO that we noticed that we had it earlier. So let me remove that file now and see what happens actually. So the solution looks like this. We have a counter file that, as earlier, we had this same idea that we have an environment name, an environment variable that can be used to set this file name. And if it's not set, that environment variable, then we are using the count.json in the local directory. So find.bin is the directory when our executable is, and then we just concatenate them together with the cat file. And then in the main route, so that's just a listing. So for now, let's skip it. And this is the route that is actually interesting, where we mean that we say that slash and then any value basically will be code here, and that is because that's the reason that favicon ICO is also used as a counter, sort of. And then we get the value that's in the name, that's the route, from the route parameters arrow get, because we are calling the get method, giving it the name. This is what the URL was, basically, the pass in the URL. Then we have this read data function that here reads basically the content of the JSON file and puts it in this, returns a reference to a hash that contains all this data, and then we increment the given counter. Now, because Perl provides auto-vivification, if the name didn't exist the first time, then this will create the entry in the hash and immediately turn it to 1, because it will assume that's gonna be 0, and then we'll saving the file here. Okay, so we're just opening the counter file for writing and then encoding into JSON. Now you can see that I didn't have to import it, because encode JSON is something that Dancer 2 provides. So we give it the reference to the hash, encoding into JSON, so this returns to as a string, a JSON string, and we print it out to the file handler. And finally, we return the counter, the current counter to the user. So what does this read the data do? Read data creates an empty hash and would return it at the end. But if the file exists, okay, we check if the counter file exists, then we open it, go to slurp mode, read it into a single string, which is, well, probably it's not really necessary at the slurp mode, because the way we saved it is going to be a one-line file, but doesn't really matter for now. So this would allow also to pretty print this JSON, and then it's still working. And then we call the decode JSON, which is again provided by Dancer, and that's how we get back the reference to this hash. And so if the file didn't exist, then we have an empty hash. If the file did exist, then we read it in. So we assume that's in the correct format, and then we return that. So that's how this whole thing works. That's how it's going to be persistent between runs of the application, because the file is on the disk. Okay, and so even if you shut down the application and start it again, it's there. And the main page is generated by creating here an HTML. And just to remind you, soon we're going to learn about templates, and then you won't have to put together an HTML like we are in the 90s. So we have an HTML, a variable called $HTML, where we have the header of sort of the h1 tag of the HTML. Then we read in the data, and this can be either an empty hash, a reference to an empty hash if the file was empty, or a hash with data, and then so it's definitely a reference to a hash. We dereference it. So actually we say if the dereferenced version is basically has values in it, so it's not empty, then we do this whole section. So then we add a UL, an unordered list at the top, and then a closing of a UL at the bottom, and in the middle we loop over the keys and just add the list items, the values, the counters. So all that is fine, but and how do we test this? So this is partially the reason we have this environment variable, so we can test it easily. In the test we use the file temp directory to create a temporary directory where we're going to store this file, and we clean it up at the end, and then we send the counter file. Okay, so that's the variable name here that we had. So we set it to this to something in the temp directory, which can be anything. I call it CNT JSON. We print it out just so we can see it, and then the actual testing is first accessing the main page and checking whether the H1 is there, but also checking, so this is I think new, before we had the like, which is a regular expression. Unlike, we'll check whether the given string doesn't match this regular expression. Okay, so it's just not match basically. That's the unlike. So we're just verifying that neither apple nor peach appear on the front page, because that's going to be the two counters that we have, and we wanted to make sure that before we start the counting, none of them appears there. And then I had a bunch of these cases that we are going to call one by one. So these are going to be the routes, and the numbers that we are expecting here. So the first time I get to apple, I'll expect 1, second time 2, third time 3, and then there's a peach that gets the first value, and if you go back to apple, then it's the fourth, number 4. And so then we can go on with the counter, and we go on with a loop, with a subtest that will, for each case, we take the first element of these small references to arrays and send them into as a request. Okay, it's a GET request. So this is what sending in the URL, and then we check whether the status line is 200 okay, and if the content is the one that's in the second value of these little arrays. So I use a fat arrow here, but it's basically the same as if I was using a comma. And after that, after I send in these 5 requests, we have another subtest in which we are also again accessing the main page and checking again if the counter is there. But now we're going to also check if apple and peach appear with the correct numbers. So we can now go and run the test, and it says everything is fine. And as you can see, it also printed out the name of the directory where this diag call printed out with the name of the file where we have this data. The file doesn't exist anymore because we had the cleanup turned on, and you can also see that the file of course is not here either. So that's it basically, how you go over how you can create this multi-counter or route-based multi-counter.